Today we've been talking about Harry Callahan, and one of the things that I love about Harry Callahan is that he's reinvented himself so many different times. He explores something and then all of a sudden, as he kind of tires of that one subject, he'll kind of switch over and start doing something else. And throughout his career, which was a really long one of the things that I love most about him is he kind of had this goal of like shooting a roll of film every day. Like he was just like, it was part of his life and process. He was just always photographing things that were around him. And the multiple exposures, especially, really start to, create something that was just different than what everybody else was doing. And, these were early on. He started, taking his pictures, starting in like the 30s. And so, these are pretty, forward thinking. So today we're going to be exploring a couple of different ways that we can go about making our own multiple exposures, because we're not going to be doing it in the camera. So we're going to jump into Snapseed first and look at a version in there. And then we're going to be downloading an application called Adobe Photoshop Express. So it's a limited small version of Photoshop for the phones, which is free. And we'll be looking at an alternative way to also create kind of the multiple exposure effect as well. So let's jump in and see what we got.
All right, so let's go ahead and get inside of Snapseed. And I've gone ahead and selected the picture that I'm going to demo with. So, this is the old beauty college down in Oceanside, and they're kind of reworking it. And what I wanted was something that had, some pretty, good shapes, along the horizon line. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and convert this into black and white. Most of Harry Callahan's were black and white. And I think it's going to work a little bit better with, a little more contrast. Again, when we go to think about multiple exposures, we're using blending modes. And what we want is, white areas and black areas. If with film, a black area was something that was unexposed, and so we could then expose back into it. When we were printing, a white area was unexposed. So the way that those will kind of interact are going to be important to us. So I'm going to just look here, and I think I kind of looked through these, and I think that, the green is doing a pretty good job of, let's take a look. Well, I want kind of a white sky. So actually blue is probably my best one. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes to that. Pancake, please don't rub your face on there. So then a couple other things that I want to do, again, to create that a little bit more contrast. I'm going to go ahead and use my exposure brush, and I'm going to up the exposure. And I'm just going to paint in this little top area here. So I want the sky to be a little bit closer to a white. And if it gets a little bit of that edge over there, that's okay. But I want, as close to a white in those areas as I can get. So that's looking a lot better. And then I also am going to darken down a little bit of the detail in here. So I'm going to go to the minus. And then I'm just going to paint in over here as well, just to kind of darken down and get some nice rich kind of shadows inside of there. All right, so now I've got that. Now, I haven't been able to find a way inside of Snapseed to, basically rotate this image. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and say check mark there. I could still play with other things, if I wanted to play with the curves or tune image, but I think it's gonna work for what we need. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit export, and I'm gonna go ahead and just export it straight to my camera roll. All right, so there went ahead and saved directly to our camera roll. Now, what I'm gonna do then is, because I wanna rotate it, so what Harry Callahan would do is he'd shoot an image and then he'd flip the camera upside down and then shoot it again. So we're gonna go ahead and move over into my photos. And this photo is now inside of my camera roll. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this one, I'm gonna hit edit, and I'm gonna go to the crop tool, and I'm going to rotate it twice. So now it's upside down, and I'm gonna say done. So now I've got the reverse image of it, at least upside down. So then, now that it's in there in my camera roll, when I come back into Snapseed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into Tools, and I'm going to do a double exposure. Now, when I do that double exposure, I'm going to go ahead and add, and I'm going to find my new photo that I just created, and there it is. Now, when it comes in originally, we're leaving the opacity at 50-50, so it's doing both of those pictures. And it's really going to come down to the blending mode here. So the default one, it starts to work, but it doesn't have that same sort of contrast. So as you go through there, I'm looking at, if I go lighten, that works pretty well. If I go to darken, nope, that's not what I want. Add, that's working okay. Nope, subtract doesn't work. Overlay doesn't work. So, lighten probably is the best one, or add. Those kind of are both doing the same thing. So then what's happened is any of those black areas, the whites kind of counterbalanced it. And so it's cut away this bottom section. It's blended together in these dark areas. And so now we kind of have that reverse image in the same way that Harry Callahan would have done some of his. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and export that one as well. Again, if you want to save a copy so you can come back and actually re-edit it, then to the save button. I'm going to go ahead and just export. Okay, so that's how we're going to do that one. And then the other way of doing it is a little bit different. So it's not exactly like a Harry Callahan, but it'll actually help us quite a bit for some of the things we're going to do later in the week. So you're going to need to download an app. So the app that we're looking for is this one here. It's called Photoshop Express. So just go to the App Store, type in Photoshop Express, and it'll pop up. And with this one, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating kind of like a mirror image. So I've already kind of been playing around with it a little bit inside of here. Let me just pick one of these images to kind of create a image for you. So here I just picked, it's kind of like a sunset picture, but again, it's kind of got those, those silhouetted rough edges. So I think it'll kind of have a similar feeling, but it'll be done in a different way. So once we have that image pulled up inside of Photoshop Express, then what we're going to do is down along this bottom part here. Let's see, maybe we should go. Yeah. So along this bottom part here, there at the very far end, there's one that says Collage. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this button here that says Collage. And then the one that we're going to use is Reflection. And so it has lots of different ways to reflect, whether it's going to go horizontal, vertical, those sort of things. So in this case, I have a horizontal picture, so I'm going to do a horizontal reflection. So once I do that, then there's my image. And if I pull up or down, it can kind of expand the canvas. So that's showing all the way to the bottom edge. And I can bring it all the way, in as well. And if I don't like this shape, I can go to this one here. It says aspect ratio. And it's got lots of different options. So like I could do a really long, thin landscape, or I could do, something that's like a taller, story, one, and then this one, I can't expand it that way, so I might, it just depends on which one you're looking at. So kind of play around with that. So, but I can create kind of this reflection effect. And again, it's not going to work exactly the way that the Harry Callahan one, but it gives us a similar sort of a feeling. And then once I'm happy with whatever my configuration of those, of that reflection is, then inside of Photoshop at the very top, there's a little button up here, and that's going to be the one that I'm going to use for sharing. Oops, let me drag that back down. Okay, share. Oop. Oh, I keep maybe hitting the wrong button. There we go. And then so when we go to do our share, I'm just going to go ahead and share it back to my camera roll so I have a copy of that. Now, so that was a vertical one with a horizontal. So with a vertical, I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to re-edit it, so I'm going to say don't save. If you wanted to come back, then you would hit save. So let's try like one of these sort of images. Let's say so here's some trees, right? Now we were in Oregon, so there's lots of pretty trees, but don't feel like, well, I don't have pretty trees like that. Even if you just took a single tree, or put it a little bit off to the right or the left, there's going to be lots of interesting things we can do with symmetry. So again, we're going to do the same thing we did before. Come along down here at the bottom. We're going to do collage and we're going to do reflection, but this time it's going to be a vertical. And then when we start to play with it, we can start to expand or contract this, and it's going to create these really interesting shapes that start to happen when there's like these overlaps. And this button here on the one that we have our vertical, it'll switch, is it going to go from the inside or the outside, right? So I can kind of play with the way these are going to kind of work together to create those shapes and things. Again, I can play with my aspect ratio. So in this case, maybe I do want something that's taller and thinner. And then again, I can start to expand this edge and really pick like where are those shapes. They start making little faces and things like that, or kind of look like little aliens or other things as we kind of go in there. Then again, we can play around. Well, what does this other way look like instead? It's kind of like creates like a little tunnel or something through there. And so just kind of play around, see what those different configurations will do in order to create an interesting kind of symmetrical reflection sort of thing. And again, this one's not exactly the way that Harry Callahan was doing it, but it might be something we can kind of play around with and explore.